Hello, I'm Lauren, and this is Improving the World. I'm an international improviser based in Hong Kong, and I speak with amazing women of improv all over the world. Today, I speak with Bente Englestoft. She is an American improviser based in LA at the moment, and we talk about diversity in improv because of the fact that she's lived in different places, and interestingly, being in those different places, she gets seen and viewed as different things depending where she is. So we talk about how that plays into improv and diversity. I hope you enjoy. Hello.
Hello, Lauren.
You are an improviser and a writer, and today we're talking about diversity in improv, which I'm really jazzed about. When you first started improv, you were overseas in Glasgow. Tell me about starting improv and what the comedy scene was like there versus other places like Denmark. You lived in Denmark before.
I first tried improv when I was in middle school, but it was like a fun thing to do as opposed to something I took seriously. And then I was doing my degree at the University of Glasgow, and there's all sorts of clubs and things like that. And at the time, I considered myself a very serious actor and a performer. And I think improv was viewed very much as a warm-up or an exercise that led to theater as opposed to the actual art itself. And to me, improv is such a theater form in and of itself. It's not just a way to devise theater, it's entertainment on its own. I wrote my dissertation in uni on improvisational theater, which I don't recommend anyone read. It's terrible. Now that I've been practicing for over a decade, I feel like, I can write a much better paper now. But in Glasgow, the Glaswegians as well as the Danes, they just have a very sharp, dry, sarcastic, nitpicky sense of humor that, having come from Denmark, which is very much how Danes are, being in Glasgow, I was like, okay, I'm comfortable with this flow of comedy and this way of joking with each other. And in fact, I had a friend in Glasgow, Jed, who said to me, Bente, you're not like other Americans, you get sarcasm. And I remember being like, badge of honor, you know? Like, I get it. But it was a very specific way of doing things. Performing improv, I didn't do it as much. That came later when I moved to Chicago. I moved to Chicago specifically to study at Second City at their improv school there.
The comedy in Chicago felt similar or different to when you were in Europe?
Oh man, it was very different. Chicago is in the Midwest. It's in Illinois. It's basically the only metropolis in Illinois. Sorry to other cities. But Chicago, they're kind and sweet and friendly. My sarcasm wasn't received as well as it was in Europe. And I realized, there's another way. You can be funny and be kind, I guess. Not to say that people aren't kind who find sarcasm funny. It is funny. It has a time, has a place, but sometimes it's exhausting being a smartass all the time. I really loved that in Chicago, the comedy came from the character or from the situation, the relationship and details. It felt much more thoughtful in that way, as opposed to how can I knock you down a peg and make everybody else laugh.
And in terms of how you were viewed, did it shift when you were in Scotland as a whole or Denmark and then Chicago? The landscape of humans looks so different in those different places. How did you get perceived?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm half Danish, half Mexican.
Did you just touch your heart when you said Mexican? You were like, hand on heart Mexican.
Yes. Hand on heart Mexican. Yeah. So living in Denmark, it's a very homogenous country. Everyone's tall, white, blonde, blue-eyed, and I was just this little round brown ball. And so I stood out in that respect. But rather than being, you're Mexican, they're like, you're American. And same thing when I went to Scotland, it's like, Bente, the American. So I only ever thought of myself as different because I was American. And then when I moved back to the States, specifically to Chicago, suddenly it was like, you're Mexican, you're Latinx. Which, yes, is true, but I didn't know people looked at me and thought that. It was a very strange thing. And Chicago is 30% Hispanic, 30% Black, 30% white, and then the last 10% sort of a mix of the rest. And so it's this huge Latino population. And suddenly it was like, that's where we're going to stick you. That was a surprise to me because I didn't know that I was other in that way.
Your Danishness didn't come up in this. So they'd go, you're Latinx. And did you ever go, I'm also Danish? Or because that wasn't as visible for the person looking in whatever lens they were looking through, it was irrelevant?
Yes, this is the thing that comes up for biracial people a lot. It doesn't matter that you're two things. What do you look like? And the only thing that would tip off that I was Danish is my name. I mean, Bente Englestoft is a very Scandinavian name. You can say that, actually, I'm also Danish, but it's almost like it's not even, it's people don't care. They're like, okay, cool, but you're Mexican. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we're not interested in that half. This is the half we want to talk about.
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
Okay. So did this then play into your improv? So you're in a place where you're seen as the American. I hear that. I've been out of the US for a long time and I am the American whether or not I want it. That's the label I get to wear. I can choose to be other characters and things, but out of accent, that's it. But in the States, I'm American. That means nothing now. Let's find other categories. And I find that it plays into improv. For you, did you feel like it was the same?
So when I started getting placed on teams and things like that, doing improv in Chicago, it was very exciting to get chosen because in a team of 10 people, you might have 3, maybe 4 women on a team. To be one of those chosen few felt, again, another badge of honor. I get it and I'm in with it, you know? Yeah. And then once I settled in and that kind of washed away, suddenly I became very aware of, oh, that's fucked. Why wouldn't it be 50-50 or more than 50% women? It's this very strange thing. When you start to pay attention to that, you start to pay attention to how cis, hetero, white, male improv is, especially in the US, it's very frustrating. And then it became a point of that needs to change. Why don't we have more people of color on improv teams or taking classes? And I remember for me, the way I really first noticed it is I was doing a show at Second City. I'd gotten cast on their diversity and inclusion team called Urban Twist. And what that sketch show does is they take archive material from Second City that other improvisers have done or written together, and we just recreate them essentially for audiences. What kept coming up is that there weren't Latinx sketches for me. I think Ethan Enriquez was the only Latinx improviser on the main stage. And I guess I got to do, 2 of his sketches, but beyond that, I was playing the white characters in the scenes because I was white passing compared to my Asian American or African American co-stars. That opened my eyes. I was like, that's weird that this hasn't come up before. It's strange that in its 50 plus year history that Second City hasn't had more Latinx people on their main stages. So that's when it really became something that was very important to me.
Just to kind of scratch at this a little bit more, did you notice it when you were literally on stage doing the stuff and you kind of have this moment where you look around, or was it an offstage context where you look around your group? When you're performing, sometimes you kind of almost have these out of body moments and you suddenly see yourself as the audience sees you, but also you see you as the player and you see the character and and you have a quick moment and then you're back in it. Outside of that, when you're having conversations with your fellow performers, you can get into certain territory sometimes and kind of also have a think and be a bit out of body. Did you find that it was in both of those contexts, or was it one more than the other?
I think it was definitely more off stage. On stage, in a zone. The audience isn't there. I see nothing. It's like I black out. Before then, I'd been on cast with people that were predominantly white, so we weren't having conversations about diversity and inclusion. Right. When I'm suddenly in a cast that's only diverse people, that's all we're talking about. We're talking about, I get put up as cleaning ladies in scenes so that I can do a Latin accent. And one of my friends told me a story about how he was standing on a chair and somebody else designated him hanging from a tree. This is an African-American actor. Exactly. And I wouldn't even call it a microaggression, just a straight up aggression. And this is like years ago. Hopefully we've done a lot of work since then. That won't happen again. But it's things like that where I was hearing these stories and going, oh my God. And then thinking about my past experiences and being like, oh, that was a bit of a microaggression. Oh, they really pimped me into that Mexican accent in that scene, things like that. So I was talking with other people who were having similar experiences that I didn't realize until I really dug deep and went, oh, that is messed up. And why aren't we talking about it?
Yeah, I hear that. I just kind of need a Zen minute. Wow. Yeah. I have had so many times of opting to filter stuff out because I just don't think it's even touchable or appropriate. And I wonder which of the people I thought was a lovely human in the audience wasn't. So you get scenes from a hat and you open the pieces of paper and you read it and you go, oh, literally never going to do that, pretending I didn't read that. I'll be crying for 3 days. Okay, this one, we'll do this. And that's what you read to the audience. So there are so many moments that I've had where there are opportunities to go into these dark caves of sadness, human sadness, and you opt out of that. But when you are live performing and something is said, it's much harder to opt out.
You're absolutely right. And especially if you're a newer or younger improviser, that can be so intimidating because you're sitting there going, I've been taught to yes and.
Right.
I've been taught to take the gift that my scene partner has given me and to build on it. Right. And unless you have somebody go, no, it's okay to say no. It's okay to say no. Yeah. And you can take what they've given you and go, no, and then make a joke out of it and take us somewhere else. That is always an option. It was definitely not explained to me enough when I was coming up, that you are allowed to say no. If you're uncomfortable on stage, you can walk away and you're not a lesser improviser for it, you know?
One of the discussions that I like having that I find often comes up because I perform with a majority of men because of comedy. We'll get into that. But I find that a lot of times we'll finish a scene and I'll be like, well, that was awkward, wasn't it? And the guys are like, I literally don't know why those words came out of my mouth. I'm so sorry. When I'm teaching or working with colleagues, a lot of what I say is, it's improv and you get to choose to turn left. So even if you said that, your character can say, I don't know why I said that, and make a new choice. You can new choice yourself. Or if you find yourself playing someone drunk, you can choose to go 5 minutes later, instantly, he was sober magically, or whatever.
You get to make it up.
Anything, because it's improv. Yeah. Being affected and not feeling like you can do anything, we get to choose to, as I say, turn left. But also the one making the situation, facilitating this awkwardness, you also get to make a choice to unsay, to rewind the scene, unsay, to rewind the scene, to peer behind the curtain and go, sorry, audience, let me try that again. That was a mistake, and put it back or whatever.
Or let's say you're a white guy and you said the wrong thing. Now your character's the bad guy. Make him the baddest bad guy. Pimp yourself into something awful happening to your character where you become low step. We want to see the bully get punished, right? Yeah. So if you're, there's so many ways where you can course correct. You can turn left. I think that's a great way of putting it.
So we talked about this idea of being the minority on stage in whatever way anyone identifies. Have you been in a situation where your previous minority status then became a majority status? And what did it feel like to have that flip for you?
Yeah, I'm currently on a all Latinx improv team called Geraldo, and we improvise in Spanish. We attempt to herald. It doesn't always go that way. Geraldo has been so special because there's something really cool about performing with people who understand your background, your references. I had the opportunity to audition for SNL in Mexico. They came to Chicago, but they were going to create SNL in Mexico. Didn't happen. But they filled the audience with all Spanish speakers. And the laughs I got that night, they still make me get butterflies in my stomach because everyone was connecting with my material on a different level. And not just in a, oh, that's funny. It's like, oh, that's funny. And I get it because that's my experience. It feels so great. And with Geraldo, our show is a variety show. So the first half hour, we have different Latinx performers. We've had clowns, we've had stand-ups, we've had sketch shows, and then we improvise the last half hour. Yeah. And our audience is predominantly Spanish speaking, but they're not all. And that's kind of our goal, to create a show that is so emotive and so physical that you don't need to speak Spanish to understand it. Having openers has been so important because we're giving a platform to Latinx performers that may not be getting in other theaters. So much of diversity and inclusion is seeing yourself on stage. It's so important, and helping other people once you're in a position to be able to.
Yeah. You mentioned both that you have the group that you're a part of now and also the diversity and inclusion group before at Second City. What has the casting been like outside of those contexts or within those contexts, improv or outside of improv?
For Second City, or what do you mean?
Well, I'm curious about when you were just auditioning and then, or on the other side of the fence behind the table. And then maybe when you are auditioning for something where they're specifically looking for you. You are the category. We want you. How does that change?
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. For improv and for teams and things like that, I think that's why I love improv so much, is that you can become anybody. You can gift yourself anything you want. Yes, you gift others, but you can also gift yourself and say, this is the character I'm playing, and you don't get to decide what I am. So there's this wonderful freedom in becoming anything. I do a lot of character stuff, solo character things. I love playing middle-aged white women. I just love it. I just love throwing on a wig and talking about my husband, you know. And I don't look like that. So it's fun for me. I think improv is so transformative in that way. Whereas when I'm auditioning for commercials or TV and films, I'm getting called for ethnically ambiguous. And
that's the category. The category is ethnically ambiguous.
Ethnically ambiguous.
Brilliant. Oh my God.
Yeah. So it's like anything that we can't really quite tell what it is. Is she Italian? Is she Middle Eastern? Like, yeah. Sure. I also get called in for Latinx roles. But what happens to me, and it's a very common thing for people who are ethnically ambiguous looking, is that we're not enough of what they want. I'm not Latinx looking enough, or I'm not ambiguous enough. They're like, no, we want someone who's Black, Asian, but also Indian. And you're like, okay, well, yeah, that's not me. When they want different, it's very narrow target that you're trying to hit. When they're looking for your type, it's still a very specific type. I found it frustrating, and that's why I think I've found more liberation and joy in improv than I have in the other side of acting.
And then when you are doing auditioning, either you are the auditioner or you are the auditionee for maybe your Latinx groups or the D&I stuff, was that audition experience different? With
Geraldo, the beauty of that is that it was friends, and because there's so few Latinx performers, it's very much like, oh, you speak Spanish and you know how to yes and? Get in here.
Okay, right.
Like, we want you. So that's kind of the beauty of that. I was on an all queer improv team, same thing. It was like, oh, you're queer and you know how to improvise? Great. Do you want to come play with us on Saturday? It's much more inclusive, you know? I think when you have those niche improv teams where they're all one thing, it's an easier time getting in because we want to encourage each other. We want to help each other. And let's say our roster is stacked and we don't need anybody else. We'll need people to sit in because somebody's out sick or whatever. And even if you take someone in who isn't as accomplished as you are, as practiced as you are, the beauty of it is that we're going to protect this person and we're going to make them shine. We're going to make sure they don't fall. Whatever slip up they have, we're going to cover it. We're going to help it. We're going to build on it. Yeah, I really haven't had like an audition situation for that.
Having been a person both who has auditioned and has held auditions, I then am often wanting other women to be next to me, but I will hold an audition and the ladies aren't there, or there are so many fewer women. And then furthermore, because not everyone, is hot shit, what happens is because you have a smaller quantity of women, then within that you have a smaller quantity of people who are good. And so I'm desperately wanting to bring in a selection of people. I'm talking about gender right now, but I mean diversity as a
but same thing applies.
Yeah. And I'm like, where are you? Did I not advertise in the right places? Like, you know, so it's hard for me because I can only choose from who it is that I see, and I'm wanting it to be as diverse as I can. And yet that's not who I have to choose from. So it's like, well, okay, do we cast 2 more white guys? Well, I need people. So this is who I have. Okay. What do you think about that? I mean,
I definitely hear you. If the pool is smaller, it's so much harder, right? I would say this to all improv theaters. The key here is that if you want good female improvisers or good improvisers that are people of color, then you need to be nurturing that in your schools. If your theater has a school, you should be trying to get more diversity in your classrooms and then nurturing those voices. Because improv is so white, you have to go outside of your neighborhood to find those people. I remember when I heard about the diversity inclusion group in Chicago, I thought it meant that our group was going to go perform in different parts of Chicago and bring improv into other communities in Chicago, more diverse communities. And that really excited me because I thought, oh, you have to see it to know that you can do it too. Representation matters so much.
Yeah.
And then when I found out that wasn't it, I was like, oh, that's kind of a bummer. And I think that someone does do this in Chicago, but taking improv shows and bringing it to schools or in neighborhoods that are not like your own and letting people see it and going, oh, that's pretty cool. And going, we teach these classes. If you were interested, you could come and do it. It'd be so much fun. And one of the things that people run into in the States anyway is that improv has become very expensive. You're paying almost $400 for an 8-week course. And most schools, it's a year-long process. So it's 8-week chunks, right? And that can be prohibitively expensive for people. And so they're doing a lot of scholarships now, at least in the US theaters. That's a great start. But I think there can be even more done. You have to start there so that when we get to the level where they're auditioning for you, they're ready. They've been through those classes, they've played on teams, they've made indie teams with their classmates and go and do bar prov. The big thing for us when I was coming up is that we would make our own teams and then we go and perform bars that definitely shouldn't have had improv happening in them. It was just, they were some of the worst shows I've ever done, but we had so much fun, and that's how we learn, you know. It's the same idea of stand-up, I think, where you go to these open mics and you have a terrible time, but it's all building your tool belt.
Yes, I have 150% lost my voice doing bar prov because no one was listening and I was trying to improvise over the din. Come on.
Exactly. Absolutely.
I hear what you're saying. And also, dear people, please come to Hong Kong and bring your skills and assets and your own perspective, because same here, you know, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. I think that we're all really struggling to make sure that we get a beautiful selection of people from different backgrounds and languages and colors and shapes and sizes and perspectives. I think that we want that as much here as there. And yes, to the education, going and doing improv with kids or people who are as yet fully, I'm not fully formed, what am I talking about, but is so wonderfully magical, because not only are you planting a seedling, but additionally they're the best improvisers because they're already doing it naturally and they don't have as many walls that society has built from them yet, and judgments. Yes.
They're not worried about being funny. They're not worried about being cool. They're just playing.
Yeah. We're retraining to be them. Bente, what are your words of wisdom for people listening? If you could speak to the younger version of you, improv peers, or people who have never tried improv and they watch this and they're thinking, I am ethnically ambiguous.
Oh gosh, I guess it would be kind of twofold. One is if you're thinking about doing improv, do it. It's so great. It's so fun. I used to teach improv at iOS before it closed, and I loved having people in my class being like, I'm doing this because it's on my bucket list, or I'm doing it because my friend told me to. They had like no interest in it. And then to watch that excitement grow over 8 weeks, it was so fun. And it really is great for so many parts of your life. It's not just good for performing. It's so good for relationships at home, for relationships in the world, at work, all of it. It teaches you so many things that you can apply to the rest of your life. So if you're thinking about it, do it. Other part is, to my younger self, I would say, quit trying to fit in. Your brand of comedy is funny. The thing that you think is funny is funny. Someone's going to laugh with you. Be bold and take chances.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Bente, if people want to see you improvise, be it in Spanish or English, I don't know if you're still teaching, but learn from you or come find you and throw money at you, can they find you?
The best way to find me is through my Instagram at Bente Ingrid, BenteIngrid.
Okay. Well, thank you so very much for your time. I really appreciate it. It was wonderful speaking with you.
And thank you for having me. This was such a treat.
Yay. It was lovely. All right, all. This is Improving the World, and please look out for more videos. Thanks. So, did you love the video? If you did, please say kind, wonderful things in the comments down below, and you can subscribe if you're feeling sassy, and look for more Improving the World. Thanks.